Hi everyone, it's Jessica. Welcome back to my channel. Today we start the final week of the Happy Day Tote Sew Along. This week we will finish the tote. I've been having so much fun so far and I hope that you have too, so let's finish this tote up. It's the final week of the Happy Day Tote Sew Along. We have our zipper pocket made. Remember, this is still open on the back. We want that like that. We have our slip pocket made for the lining. We have our outside of our bag made. The front has a slip pocket and the back is plain. I'm going to set the front and back aside and we're going to work with the lining. So it's time to start sewing everything together. Like I said, this is the last week and you're going to have a finished bag after this week. So the first step to do is to take one of the linings. Now it doesn't matter which one is on the top and which one is on the bottom here, but you're going to match them right sides together. And then you can pin or clip to secure them. And we're going to sew along the left side, along the bottom, and along the right side with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm going to get this pinned up and then we'll start sewing. I have my bag pinned. And usually, since I'm not used to sewing with pins, I end up taking them out as I go. Probably even before I need to take them out, but that's okay. And I'm using a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I can visualize that on my machine bed here. It's marked, so it's really easy to stay in line with it. Now if you don't have that on your machine bed, or you're worried that you won't maintain a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, here's what you can do. I did it on the bottom so you could see it. You could mark it with a ruler. So I put my quilting ruler on here. I drew a line at the 3/8 of an inch mark, and then now I just sew on that line. And it, if you feel like it's guesswork getting the seam allowance perfect, this takes the guesswork out of it. So this option is available to you if you'd like. And now I have that sewn together. So again, I sewed across both sides and the bottom, but this is open. So now we're going to close these corners. And kind of the best way to do that is just pick the bag up and kind of separate both layers. Sometimes you have to put your hand inside. The interfacing from the slip pocket makes it a little bit stiff to do this. But basically, you're just going to take this corner, and what you want to do is line up the seam allowances here. Now you can choose which way. It doesn't really matter which way you push it, but I push them in opposite directions so that I nest them. And I start with the seam allowance first. When I have that in place, then I'll just put a wonder clip on it. And then I just kind of get the bag to lay nice and flat. And the rest just kind of falls into place. So then I would just put a clip here. And then you can put a clip here if you want to. And if you want to do more than 3, you can do more than 3. So now this corner is clipped. And then you basically just kind of take the bag. It has a tendency to want to form like a U, but when I sew this, I try to make sure that it's not. It's easier said than done. On the lining, it's not that difficult. As the bag gets thicker, it's a little bit harder, but I try to make this so that it's straight and I don't let it form that U because I want to maintain this gets a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance also. I want to maintain my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way across here. And I don't want that U to change how I'm sewing. This side is finished. Straight across with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, I chose to push the bottom seam this way. So that means when I match my other corner, I want to continue that so that the bottom of the bag is going to lay flat. If I were to push it this way, it'd be twisted. And honestly, if you do that, it really doesn't matter. It's in the bottom and it should get lost in there. But I try to do it correctly here. And then so we repeat that now on the other side. So here is what it looks like so far. This side's sewn, this side's not. So I'll walk my way back over here, making sure the seam allowance is going in the correct direction. And then I'll put this down on my machine. Again, it wants to curve, but I do my best to arrange this so that it is straight. And then we'll sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now the lining of the bag is sewn together. It's inside out, that's okay. I'm just gonna set this aside and we're going to work on the outside of the bag. Now you do the same thing here that we did with the lining. However, here we're using a 1/4 inch seam allowance instead of 3/8. So when I'm matching this one up, I just take a second to make sure that my seams are matching where my fabric changes. So I start on one side and I'll pin, I'm probably gonna clip. I'll clip this seam together, then I'll go to the next one and just match that up there. And sometimes, you know, I make these and they're off and it just happens, so it's okay. But I do try to get my prints to match up so that when it's sewn together, they look like they flow continuously into each other. Then I'm going to repeat that on this side too before I start sewing. And just like we did on the lining, we're sewing both sides and then this bottom, and then later we'll sew the corner. So first step is to sew the sides and the bottom 1/4 inch seam allowance, not 3/8. This is quite a bit puffier than the lining, so it, you know, you have to kind of help it get through a little bit. Okay, so we've sewn on both sides and the bottom, and now we need to do the corners. And so I just did exactly like I did before. This seam is a little bit thicker, so if you want to go ahead and sew this open, you can do that. Whatever method you like better, open or to the side. I'm probably going to go open on the bottom here. So I just put my clips in to hold it. Now this is a little bit stiffer because of the soft and stable, so the bag can actually just stand. I usually just try to push it down so I'm comfortable holding it with my left arm. And then I start sewing back stitch and then sew across here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And repeat that on the other side too. Now we're ready to do the final step and sew the bag and the lining together. So we're going to leave the bag wrong side out like this. And we're going to take the lining, turn it right side out, and make sure that you unzip your zipper. That's extremely important here. Now you need to decide where you want your slip pocket and your zipper pocket. I usually put my zipper pocket on the opposite side of the front slip pocket. So here is my front slip pocket. I'm going to put my inside slip pocket on the same side and my zipper on the back. But if you want it a different way, you can go ahead and just feel free to change that. Now what you're going to do is clip across the top. So I like to start by matching the side seams first. So I go down to the bottom just to double check which way this seam is going, and it's going this way. And it's okay if you push this seam open still, or if you change it to one side, because it's inside of this thick bag. Like, I don't find that you notice that difference. So I'm just going to clip that seam. Then I'm going to clip the other side seam. Once those are matched up, then we'll start matching the rest. So these are my first priority to get those clipped right. Now we're going to just take the handles and make sure they're inside the bag and that they're laying flat. The handles should not get in the way here at all. They're, you know, down from the top edge. So as long as you have them shoved in here, they're going to be okay and not get in your way. So that's one. And then let's put this other one in too. Great. Now I kind of just like take the bag and do this. And you see, like, when I pull these two sides, it lines the lining and the bag up perfectly. So I kind of do that to get myself started, and then I'll start pinning, actually clipping. And you can put as many clips as you want to feel confident here, and just make sure that you're lining the bag and the lining up straight across together. Sometimes the lining has a tendency, if you can see it here, it's matched, but then it like dips down. It doesn't need to stay like that. It needs you to put it up in line with the bag, because you want to sew around the whole top with your seam, a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you don't want to miss anything. If you miss anything, there'll be a hole in your bag. So I'm just going to continue clipping around the top here. Now, depending on your machine, you may want to take the actual table off so you can just get right close to the arm of the sewing machine. We're going to sew around here with 1/4 inch seam allowance. I like to start at a side seam. And even still, with the table off, it's a little bit of maneuvering to get this under there and get everything placed right. Just take your time and make sure you're placed right before you start. So I'll drop my needle here and start sewing. I back stitch. And then we're going to sew around the outside, maintaining 1/4 inch seam allowance. You do have to adjust quite a bit, like you're going to have to pull the back up to the front like that as you go. So we're gonna sew here, but as you see, our space up front will get tighter every time we sew, and we need to rotate it. So that's when I just go under here and then I bring it to the front, and it helps it lay better. So just take your time and sew around the top here. Make sure you're going through all the layers. That's why it's important to pin this correctly, because you want to make sure you're getting all of the layers sewn together here just right. I finished sewing, so now I have sewn around the bag completely with 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now here's the important part. That's why we didn't sew this bottom together, and that's why we left the zipper open, because we can reach in through this pocket and through the open zipper here and pull the bag so that it's right side out. And because we have the entire bottom of this zipper pocket to work through, it's not so tough. Sometimes, there's a variety of ways to make bags. None of them are right or wrong. They're all just different ways, and they all have their own pluses and minuses. But what I like about this one is that you're pulling the bag through this really big spot. So you're not working to get this entire bag through like a 2 or 3 inch area. That is always, to me, extremely difficult, and I really stress about that. But here we have this whole big opening of the pocket, and it makes it really easy to turn the bag right side out. So just take your time working the bag through that big opening until it's right side out. And then I usually just take my hands and I put it back down the pocket, and then I just push these corners out and everything. Now you could press this if you wanted to get a really sharp, nice corner here. You could press it. I tend to not do that, but you absolutely could if you wanted to. So I get the bottom of the bag laying nice, and then I take the lining and put it into the bag. We will sew that pocket closed, but I like to make sure that everything is correct first. And the next thing I do, I have some of these strings where my fabric was fraying. So I'm just going to go around and cut these, make sure they aren't showing. And then what we need to do is get the top to lay nice. And there's, 2 ways that I know to do it. See how there's a tendency here to have this lining stick up, but what we actually want the bag to do is this. Kind of like when we did the welt zipper pocket. So you can work with your hands holding it, and you can press this and it will stay really nice. But the other way that I have found that I absolutely love is I wet it and clip it. So what I do, this is just water in a spray bottle. I just spray this so that it's wet, like it's pretty saturated. And then I take the fabric and I get it how I want it to be. So just like that. And then I put a wonder clip here. And I do this all the way around and then just let the bag dry like this. It doesn't take that long. And I just really like this method. It's kind of like spray it, clip it, let it go. And then when we go back to the sewing machine later after it's dry, it's really easy to top stitch around the whole bag. So this is my preferred way, but if you would prefer to iron here, you absolutely could do that. You would just use your fingers to get the bag to lay nicely so that the lining is all the way inside and you're not really seeing it on the outside. And then press it. So I'm just going to continue clipping around the whole top of my bag. And then I will come back here when it's dry and we'll take the clips off and do the final step. My tote bag is completely dry now. You use quite a bit of clips to hold this together while it dries, and it's going to be perfect now. So I'm just going to take the clips off, and then we will sew the 2 final things that we need to sew on this tote bag. So you can see now I have my clips removed and everything is still laying perfectly because it dried like this. So this is my favorite way to do it. It works so nicely. I have my 1/4 inch foot on. That's going to help me stay a 1/4 inch from the edge all the way around. However, this is just to finish the bag off. So if you prefer going closer to the edge, like when we sew really close to the edge like we did on the handles, like the 1/8 or 1/16 of an inch from the edge, you can do that. Either way will work here. And basically we just sew all the way around the top of the bag. And just like when we were sewing it when it was inside out, you do have to keep rotating the bag to make sure that it's laying nice and flat and that you have a good, you know, steady feed coming in so it doesn't wiggle wobble on you. Once I get back to where I started, I just backstitch and then cut the thread. And I usually start sewing at a side seam, so you don't really notice it. On this print you can't, but depending on what print you had on the top, you might be able to notice the start and stop. And now the top of the bag is finished really nice. So the final thing that we need to do is sew this pocket closed. So I reach in. Now you can do this by hand with a ladder stitch if you want, but since this is in the inside of a zipper pocket, I usually don't bother to do that. So I just make sure that this little side seam is tucked in. The edges of this pocket are already finished because we press the fabric up in the wrong direction when we put this pocket on, so the raw edges are into the inside. And then what I do is I usually just, you know, straighten this and I sew really close to the edge so that I'm closing the pocket and enclosing the raw edges, and then this pocket will be functional then. It just looks like this, and then you can push your pocket back into the zipper area. Get it laying nice, and then you zip it up. And our tote bag is finished, so let's have a look at it. Here's what this tote bag looks like now. So this is the outside of mine. I use the Ohio Star pocket. And the back, we've got long handles here so we could wear it under the arm, and it sits about there on me. The inside of the bag is finished. We have the 2 slip pockets, and then across that on the other side we have the welt zipper pocket that we just closed up, so now it's a fully functional pocket that you can put things into. And that is all for this sew along. So if you have any questions on finishing this tote bag up, just let me know. Thank you for sewing along with me. I hope you had a really good time making this bag, and I hope you enjoy making more of them. I know this will not be my last one. I've quilted more fabric already, and it's just waiting for me to turn it into a bag. So I'll be making those soon in the future. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you back here soon.